I'm not a perfect person, but even a flawed person can have a sincere heart. I've fallen in love with an alpha who is 10 years younger than me. But I have a fiancé. He has a high position and great power and doesn't want to give me my freedom. He always gently ruffles my hair with a smile. I know you like to have fun. I'll wait for you. Come back and marry me when you've had enough. But today, he was out of character. He propped his chin and made a bet with me. Let's make a bet. If Clark really loves you, I'll set you free. I had full confidence in Clark and readily agreed. The next day, I ran into Clark surrounded by a crowd at the entrance of the bar. They seemed to be talking about me. Clark, when are you planning to break up with that old beta? Clark paused for a few seconds, and just as I thought he wouldn't respond, he spoke up without hesitation. Almost done. As soon as he breaks off his engagement with Martin and William takes over, we'll split. The William he mentioned is my father's illegitimate son from outside the family. Lately, he's been openly contesting me for the inheritance. I never thought I'd lose, let alone lose so quickly. I let out a soft grunt and turned back toward the bar. It wasn't that I wanted to run away, just didn't want to cause a scene in public or end up looking bad. The Omega who had approached me earlier noticed I'd come back and quietly took a seat beside me, holding a drink. What's wrong? Didn't you say your family member was strict? I gave a wry smile and clinked my glass against his. I just didn't want to disappoint someone special, so I ended things earlier. He's not the one in charge at home anymore. The Omega let out a light laugh. So does that mean what you said before still stands? The moment the words left his mouth, a sharp stare shot down my back like ice. I turned around and met a pair of dark, cold eyes. Derek. Clark had been there for who knows how long, his gaze fixed on the Omega in my arms. Who is he? The Omega shivered slightly under his stare, instinctively pressing closer into my arms. I glanced at him briefly. Mind your own business. Clark's expression stayed grim as he asked again. Who is he? You never truly gave your heart. What exactly are you trying to prove by acting like this? I didn't feel like arguing, so I simply carried the person past him. It's not your place to question me. My arm was gently pulled back. You promised me you'd only have one person. I let a sardonic smile tug at my lips. You can't actually believe I meant what I said. Can you? You really thought that was real? It was just for fun, like playing with kids. That's right, just like that. Slowly picking up the pieces of my broken self-worth. Clark froze, his face gradually growing pale. You're kidding. You were just pretending from the start, weren't you?